Welcome into our Texas football season preview. I'm Horns247 managing editor Taylor Estes, joined by longtime Texas columnist at Horns247, Chip Brown. Chip, all eyes are on Texas football leading into Steve Sarkisian's second year at the helm. I think it's time to talk some detailed Texas football here. You ready for that?
Let's go. Let's go. Let's feed the insiders here. That's what we do.
That is what we do. And I think it's safe to say that the question on pretty much every Texas fan's minds right now is what on earth is going on with the Texas quarterback battle between Hudson Card and Quinn Ewers. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that Steve Sarkisian has his hand-picked guy in Quinn Ewers. He's trying to get him up to speed as fast as possible. He's the pocket passer. He's the drop-back quarterback with all the throws, all the arm angles, the highest rated recruit in the 2021 cycle. This is the guy. And as long as he can protect the football, he's going to be the guy probably starting the season opener.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that, if you listen to our show, the flagship podcast, Chip and I have talked at length about the quarterback battle since it's on everyone's mind. But the reality is, you're exactly right. Steve Sarkisian handpicked Quinn Ewers. He kind of inherited Hudson Card. Quinn Ewers fits the more prototypical type of quarterback that Steve Sarkisian looks for or likes to utilize in his style of offense. And Chip, I think we should start off here with a segment we do on the flagship podcast, which is our "Love It or Leave It" session. And I think we got to start with Quinn Ewers. So I'm going to pose a "Love It or Leave It" for you. Okay.
All right.
All right. Love it or leave it. Quinn Ewers will be the starting quarterback at the start of the season.
I'm going to love this. I mean, I think that Quinn Ewers is, he's got the pocket presence. He's the guy who's, he's Steve Sarkisian's handpicked guy. He may have only played 4, snaps at Ohio State last year. I didn't throw a pass, but he's the guy that Steve Sarkisian wants to build this program around. That type of quarterback. Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, Casey Thompson, and Hudson Card were dual threat quarterbacks recruited by Tom Herman. Those are not Steve Sarkisian's type of quarterbacks. He wants guys who are going to stay in the pocket, make the reads, step up in the pocket. Hopefully there's a better offensive line this year for the quarterbacks, a better pocket for the quarterbacks. But that's what Steve Sarkisian wants. And the sooner he can get on that path and have that kind of quarterback executing his offense, the sooner Steve Sarkisian, I think, feels his offense will take off and be the kind of offense that everybody imagined, including Texas brass, when they hired Steve Sarkisian. They hired him to be able to match wits with Lincoln Riley offensively and build a team that could compete in the SEC. Lincoln Riley's gone, but he's still got to build a team that can compete with the SEC because that's where Texas is going, probably in 2024.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we did get at least one really exciting matchup between Steve Sarkisian and Lincoln Riley before he did bolt for USC. But you're exactly right. And I'm going to have to agree with you and love this too, just because of everything pretty much that you just said. I mean, this is a handpicked guy. This is a guy that Steve Sarkisian, I mean, he recruited Quinn Ewers when he was at Alabama too. I mean, there's a long time relationship between these two. And obviously Steve Sarkisian, and his staff worked overtime to try to get Quinn Ewers, to transfer to Texas, which ended up being successful. But you're right. I mean, the Quinn Ewers of the world, the Arch Mannings of the world, those are the type of quarterbacks Steve Sarkisian likes to utilize. He doesn't like to have a dual threat quarterback because his whole concern is, quarterbacks, he doesn't want his quarterback to get hit at all. And he especially doesn't want it to be a moving target on the open field. So I think that you have to love this. And plus the other thing too, that I think you have to consider when you're talking about this decision is if Steve Sarkisian were to pick Hudson Card again, he picked him to be the starter going into his first year at Texas. I almost feel like he's kind of cutting his leash a little bit even shorter if it doesn't work out, because I think that the natives are a little restless here at Texas. I think that's really safe to say after last year's season, and understandably so. And I think that going with a younger guy in like a Quinn Ewers, who fits, more of his style of quarterback play that Steve Sarkisian likes will give him a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt from the fans because it's like, oh, he's bringing in a first-time player at quarterback. Not that he has a ton of benefit of the doubt right now, but still, I do think that also has to kind of play into it, a little bit, Chip, if you're Steve Sarkisian too.
Yeah, I mean, this if no nothing against Hudson Card. Kid is, he's at his dream school. He grew up in the Austin area. He feels like he outperformed Quinn Ewers in the spring and has given it everything he's got here in fall camp. But if Hudson Card starts the season, it is a stopgap measure. It's just until Quinn Ewers can get comfortable with this offense enough to where he's protecting the football to Steve Sarkisian's liking. So, um, I could be wrong. Hudson Card may have reinvented himself. He may have, completely found pocket presence in the span of a year, and that would be amazing. That would be a great story. We'll see, but I get the feeling that Quinn Ewers is the guy.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. And I think we have a question here from the audience about Juan Davis here. I'll read it to you, Chip. Juan Davis has always jumped out to me when watching spring game film. Could we see him flash and potentially have an important role on the offense? That's a redshirt freshman tight end, Juan Davis.
Yeah, Juan Davis is a really slippery flex tight end who was bothered by a hamstring injury last year. It just and it, they weren't in a position where, as he was a true freshman, he was learning on the fly with a hamstring injury. This year, we're more likely to see him. Now, they did bring in Jaleel Billingsley, a veteran flex tight end from Alabama, and Juan Davis is getting a chance to, work alongside a guy who's a veteran. But I see Juan Davis being a guy that becomes a weapon because this question is right on the money. Juan Davis is fast and he's a willing blocker. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he is a willing blocker and he's got good hands and he's good with the ball in his hands once he makes the catch. So I think Juan Davis is a sleeper, a guy to keep an eye on, a guy who maybe you save him for Alabama or Oklahoma or a game that your fans absolutely want you to make a big play in and sneak 81 out there and see if you can get him alone on the seam against zone coverage and let him make a big play.
Yeah, and this is the tight end position is one that's kind of in flux a little bit this year with Texas losing Cade Brewer, longtime starter at tight end. But there's a lot of talent there, I feel. And from everything that we had heard, we talked to Jeff Banks, the special teams coordinator and tight ends coach, before the start of fall camp, and he talked about how you look at like a Jatavian Sanders, and he was a little bit more behind when it came to blocking, and even in spring football. That was a guy who started off and they were not too impressed with his intensity, but he really stepped it up. So the tight end role, in my opinion, is one to watch, but there's a lot of talent in that room that could be potential weapons for this offense. And I mean, that's kind of scary when you think about some of the other weapons that are on this offense for Texas in year 2 under Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah, and Gunnar Helm was the guy who was ahead as the blocking tight end. And then Jeff Banks told us that Jatavian Sanders, the 5-star recruit, that they were mad at him after 1 week of spring ball and said, where's the physicality? What's going on here? And that Jatavian Sanders has responded and become much more physical, much more of that H-back lead blocking type of tight end that Sarkisian desperately needs. Not only for all the motions and shifting to try to help the quarterback determine if the defense is in man or zone, but also on power plays and, plays where he is the lead blocker. And so I think Gunnar Helm has been the more proven blocker for a little longer period of time than Jatavian Sanders, but Jatavian Sanders, unbelievable athlete, speed, agility, shiftiness down the field. These are players, Juan Davis, Gunnar Helm, Jatavian Sanders, that you want to buy stock in. They are a growth stock for Texas football. and your eye candy is going to get lost on Bijan Robinson and that running back room and the wide receivers, including Wyoming transfer Isaiah Neyor. But you want to buy stock right now in that Texas tight end room. We'll see how elevated that stock can go in 2022, Taylor.
Yeah, and when you talk about blocking, this is going to lead to another love it or leave it I have for you here. I think any help on the offensive line can get from a blocking perspective, they need, because this offensive line is one of the biggest questions for Texas this season. And with that said, Chip, I'm going to ask you this: love it or leave it. Texas will have one true freshman offensive lineman start the season. Love it or leave it.
Yeah, I'm going to love this because I think Kelvin Banks is a guy you cannot keep off the field. I actually just wrote an extensive insider column that came out this morning on Kelvin Banks and the guys who've been in the trenches with him, his high school coach. And, we're hearing stories, really interesting stories from, Bijan Robinson walking up to Kelvin Banks in the weight room over the summer saying, Kelvin, we're going to get in work today. And Kelvin Banks looked at him and was like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm in here already grinding. And Bijan was like, whoa. And then Jordan Whittington says that a play didn't go Whittington's way the other day in practice. And Kelvin Banks is running toward him on the field, big 78, saying, hey, it's okay. Let's move on. And Jordan Whittington's one of the top leaders on the team. So when your best players are taking note of this guy, and the thing that you love is he won't let his teammates slack. Mm-hmm. He's the kind of guy that's going to, stay on every single guy in that offensive line room until they are doing exactly what they've been told at the highest effort level they can possibly give. And that's something Texas has been sorely lacking.
Yeah, it has. And one thing I kind of wonder, you think it's only going to be one true freshman, or do
Well,
you
that's
think
the thing. I mean,
multiple?
it could be
That's
two.
more, yeah, that's kind
It
of
could
where
be
I'm going with
three.
that. I was
I mean,
like one maybe underselling it a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, Cameron Williams is a guy they love at right tackle. And that's where Christian Jones is right now, the fifth-year senior who really struggled at left tackle last year. You wonder where Christian Jones' confidence is right now. Cameron Williams is a monster. I mean, he's 6'7", 374 pounds, and can move. And his arm length, Taylor, is NFL quality. I mean, all he has to do is get his hands on you, and you're not going to get to the quarterback. So I think it's he could end up being a starter. I don't know if he's a game one guy, but I think he could be starting at some point in the season. Cole Hudson is already getting first team reps at right guard. He was here for the spring. They're working Connor Robertson, the freshman, at center. I mean, I think it'll be one on day one, game one, but it could be two or three by the end of the season, maybe more. I don't know, but they really do feel good about this entire offensive line recruiting haul, Taylor, the best offensive line recruiting class in the country.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, this was one of the best offensive line and defensive line, honestly, hauls that Texas got in 2022 ever since I started covering Texas. And when you talk about Cam Williams, when you see his measurables listed at 6'7", 374 pounds, that is not, padding the stats or anything like that. I mean, you see this kid in person, you're just like, goodness, that is a true freshman, and his arm length literally almost goes down to his knees. I mean, he kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Leonard Davis in a little tiny sense, honestly, just because in addition to being huge, he's a freak athlete too, from everything that we've heard. So that's going to be something to watch, no doubt about it. Here's a question from one of our viewers, Chuck Mason. Chip, can Texas make a Baylor turnaround this year?
Can they? Yes, but that question is going to be answered by the Texas defense, because that was the mystery about this football team last year. Steve Sarkisian said, hey, our coaches prepared the team to play well all of last season because Texas got off to good starts in games that they lost. We know about the double-digit third-quarter leads against OU, Oklahoma State, Baylor, but they led Iowa State 7-3 in Ames before losing that game 30-7. That was the game where Bo Davis, the defensive line coach, was secretly recorded by someone on that team bus, saying, I was embarrassed, and where's your embarrassment? And I think that's where the answer lies. I mean, if this Texas defense can get on the same page, there were times, Taylor, that the coaches didn't look like they were in sync. It didn't look like they had any adjustments. It didn't either that or they weren't getting communicated. There was a breakdown happening somewhere from player to player, player to coach to coach. That all has to get fixed. And everyone's like, oh, Gary Patterson's here now to save the day. Gary Patterson is not an on-field coach. He's a special assistant to Steve Sarkisian. That can work one of two ways. I mean, if this defense gets off to a good start, everything's great. If this Texas defense doesn't get off to a good start, it looks like the same defense from last year, fans are going to be calling for Gary Patterson to take over the defense. And his defense is a lot different than Pete Kwiatkowski's defense, and it's very complex. So, I think this is a situation where Steve Sarkisian's going to earn every dollar, making sure that defensive room, coaches, players, everybody's on the same page so that we see the improvement necessary for Texas to possibly make a Baylor type turnaround this year, because they've got the talent to do it.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about the defense, I mean, and just kind of the not even kind of the inconsistencies you saw almost week in and week out. It was almost apparent that there was some sort of communication breakdown just watching them on the field. I do think, though, that the fact that this staff, none of the defensive staff, Pete Kwiatkowski didn't pick his his assistant coaches on defense. He was one of the last coaches that Steve Sarkisian did hire. And so I think just the familiarity among the staff being coaching, for the last year together should be a reason to think that this defense will be improved. Now, we'll see when adversity strikes, because that was one of the bigger issues, I think, that came down in 2021. It was like something bad happened and then the wheels came off. And so I agree with you. I think that how the defense plays is going to be really crucial in the success for Texas this season. When you talk about Baylor-like turnaround, I kind of am thinking that's a tall task to ask. And I know it was done, obviously. Texas fans watched Baylor go from a 2-win team to the Big 12 champions last season. So in just, 2 years. So it can be done. However, I think Texas has a pretty tough schedule this year. I think the Big 12 is going to be a little bit better than it maybe looks on paper right now. And so that, to me, makes me think maybe not right now. But if the defense can really come together, Chip, I would say, who knows what this team can be this season.
Well,
Go ahead.
Baylor had some war daddies going into last season on defense that you knew about.
Mm-hmm.
Terrell Bernard, Jalen Petrie. You thought that Siaka Ika was going to be a good player. He turned out to be a fantastic player, holding the point at that nose tackle position. And so Texas, we think Byron Murphy could be a Siaka Ika type of talent on the defensive line. DeMarvion Overshawn is incredibly athletic, but didn't hold up for 4 quarters in every game last year. And in the secondary is a big question mark. So I've been saying, if Texas can just hold opponents to 25 points per game this year, I think they win 9 games, Taylor.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. We have a little bit of a recruiting type of question here. With great recruiting classes, we look at the future as bright, but for the time frame, when could Texas challenge for a conference title? It seems like they're always saying in a couple of years. From Gilbert Martinez. Thanks for the question, Gilbert. Chip, I'll let you go first. What do you think?
Gilbert, I think you speak for the Texas fan base. I mean, you keep looking at the quarterback situation and saying, okay, is the quarterback situation right? Do they have a guy with experience in big games who we know can finish, can lead, come from behind, game-winning drives? I think I saw where Adrian Martinez in 4 years at Nebraska never led a game-winning drive in the fourth quarter. Um, wow.
Yeah.
That I mean, people are really high on K-State, but Adrian Martinez has turned it over at 16 career fumbles. Um, and so you look at that, and then you look at the trenches. Where is Texas in the trenches? On defense, they should be a lot better. I mean, Alfred Collins, former 5-star recruit, got all the NFL measurables. Byron Murphy, we mentioned, but Tavondre Sweat, Keandre Coburn, Moro Ojimo, and now even Vernon Broughton. These guys are talented. They should be able to impose their will on teams and help create plays for the linebackers in the secondary. Let's see it. I mean, Steve Sarkisian said we have the best defensive line coach in the country in Bo Davis, and our defensive line needs to play like that. I know Bo Davis got a job offer from Brian Kelly at LSU, turned it down. He got a nice raise at Texas, but that defensive line has to lead this defense because that's where the experience is. That's where there's upside, and that position totally underperformed last year. If Texas's defense is going to turn around, everyone needs to be talking about those names I just mentioned, the way that people talk about Baylor and Terrell Bernard and Jalen Petrie and Siaka Ika. So, I think Texas probably is a year away. But with guys like Kelvin Banks and some of these guys they've brought in the trenches, Quinn Ewers, there's a chance it could turn around. Uh, like we said, a possible Baylor turnaround, but it feels like it's a year away, Taylor. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think the biggest thing when you talk about the recruiting classes is you've got to stack your recruiting classes. You can't just have one really good recruiting cycle and then mediocre ones. What I do think would give me a little bit more quote unquote hope that Texas were is a couple of years away. Sorry, I know that's what Texas fans always are saying. Is I do like the way that the staff is recruiting. They're making an emphasis on recruiting in the trenches. And you look back at, Tom Herman's staff, or excuse me, his recruiting classes, there was a lot of talented, recruiting classes, top 5 recruiting classes that he signed at 3 straight years, I think it was. But every single year, my question was, where's the beef? I mean, how many skill players can really win a championship for you? And that's what, Steve Sarkisian's taking a different approach in focusing on the trenches. That to me makes me actually think they may be a couple of years away from competing for a conference title. And, they're seeing a lot of success in the 2023 class right now. The commitment of Arch Manning was huge, huge, huge. But even look at some of they pretty much have their offensive line class like done right now. And things can change, obviously. It's August, so these guys probably won't sign till December. But still, I think that the way that this staff is recruiting should give Texas fans more hope for the future, just because they are emphasizing, getting big bodies or big humans, as Steve Sarkisian likes to call it. And that's what win games. I mean, look at Alabama, look at Georgia, look at these SEC teams. You compare their lines of scrimmage to some of the Texas lines of scrimmage in recent years, and it's like the adults and versus the children, kind of. I mean, I know that sounds mean. It's probably a little harsh, but it is the reality. So I do think that Texas is still a couple of years away. If Steve Sarkisian and his staff continue to recruit the way that they have, put that emphasis on getting quote unquote big humans in the program, I think that should give Texas fans hope for the future.
Yeah, guys got to be developed. I mean, look at what Steve Sarkisian did with Xavier Worthy last year. Comes in as a true freshman, 12 touchdown catches. Well, broke all the Texas freshman records for touchdowns with 12 receptions, 62 yards, 981. Let's see that on the defensive side this year. Let's see it maybe with a BJ Allen at safety or a Jalen Gilbo at corner, because you want to see the good players in that recruiting class getting developed and getting developed early.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You wanna see that continue, and I do like the staff that Steve Sarkisian currently does have. Um, I'm interested and intrigued to see, what Tashard Choice and what Brennan Marion bring, as coaches in year one here. But yeah, I think development is definitely key, and I think pretty much everybody on the staff has proven that they know how to develop at least other places. Let's see it continue here at Texas.
Yeah, yeah. And again, just you want that alignment
Mhm.
on defense.
Yep. All right. Here's a question from Jesse Ullman. Sark said Bo Davis will be allowed to coach his guys his way. Was he handcuffed last year by Pete Kwiatkowski? If so, is that some of the reason our D line struggled so badly last year?
Yeah, Jesse, I think that's the question everyone wants to know. Of course, Texas is saying, "Oh no, it's we made some adjustments in the offseason and we're going to have some new wrinkles." Um, we've heard Steve Sarkisian say that he wants guys like Keandre Coburn, Alfred Collins to show they can rush the passer, get more penetration. Um, and so, we're the defensive linemen just holding up the offensive line for the linebackers to make plays because that was not a good strategy. They weren't deep enough or talented enough at linebacker to do that last year. They needed the guys up front to make as many plays as possible. Um, you know, Kwiatkowski didn't trust the coverage, so they played a ton of zone. That's pretty predictable, especially in the high flying Big 12. So I do think that, Steve Sarkisian has said to Pete Kwiatkowski, we've got to be more aggressive. We got to trust these players, or at least trust them until they give us a reason not to trust them. And that's so I do think you'll see that. And look, Bo Davis got the raise, the job offer from LSU. So he's got some leverage right now. And he's a tough-minded guy. Pete
Yeah.
Kwiatkowski's quiet. Pete Kwiatkowski coaches the defensive ends. Bo Davis and Pete Kwiatkowski have to be on the same page. And it sounds like Bo Davis he's got 3 national championship rings. Pete Kwiatkowski doesn't have any. So I'm sure that they had to come together and figure out maybe Pete Kwiatkowski's listening a little bit more. Let's put it that way, to guys like Bo Davis and what this defensive line needs. So all eyes are going to be on that group to see how they come out at the beginning of this season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I think every Texas fan that saw the video that should have never seen the light of day of Bo Davis on the bus following that Iowa State game, you hoped that the defensive linemen start taking that approach, that anger, and playing with that type of fire that you did hear from Bo Davis. He is a very fiery coach, as you mentioned. It's going to be interesting to see how much the defensive line improves this year, but there's no doubt that it needs to improve sooner rather than later.
Yeah, because that's a veteran group,
Mhm.
and you got some dogs in there. I mean, a guy like Byron Murphy needs to be kind of flexing vocally the same way that we're hearing Kelvin Banks, the true freshman, is flexing. Don't shy away just because you're an underclassman. If you see guys not giving max effort, then step up and say it and say it's not okay, because that's until the players are truly policing the players on the field, off the field, the magic is not going to happen. The sooner the players are policing the players, coaching each other, that's when it takes off.
Yeah, I mean, Mac Brown said that the easiest, year that he had as a coach was 2005 when they won the national championship. I mean, that's
Cruise
because of
control.
yeah, I mean, his there was such great player leadership and it's so crucial. And you're exactly right. You need guys holding other ones accountable. And I think you have to hope that Texas is getting more of those guys in recruiting too that are, the ones that want to hold each other accountable, like the Kelvin Banks, the stories we're hearing about him that's huge. So yeah, the sooner that can happen, the better. I have a question from our guy Trey Scott here, Chip. What's the unofficial win-loss prediction before we wrap up here today?
Well, I've said a successful 2022 would be 8 wins in Arch Manning. Um, Texas got the commitment from Arch Manning. Now they got to go get 8 wins to show progress. And it is a wide open Big 12, but there are some tough road games for Texas against teams that already know how to win. road games at Oklahoma State, at Kansas State this year. You've got always Oklahoma in the crucible of the Cotton Bowl, and the number one ranked team in the country in Alabama coming to your place. And that sleeper game against UTSA, Jeff Traylor, the team that went 12-2 last year and took Conference USA. So if this Texas team doesn't come into the season with the right confidence level and that even keel nature and that trust that even when things are bad, they're going to be okay. We're going to answer. We're going to find a way to win. If they don't have that mentality, then you could see a 7-5, 6-6 type year, and that's not going to keep the momentum going. So if they do have that mentality and let's say they cover against Alabama, I mean, to me, that's the goal, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're going up against the Heisman Trophy winner and maybe this year's Heisman Trophy. Well, Bryce Young won it last year. Maybe Will Anderson wins it from the defensive end position this year. Just cover, play your butts off, play physical, scrap, make some big plays in that game, show that it's not too big for you. And then you start to carry momentum into that Big 12 season. And then who knows? Because it's wide open. There's a lot of quarterback questions. It's the year of the transfer at the quarterback position in the Big 12, including Texas. So, I've said 8 wins, 8 regular season wins. Taylor, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet, and I think it's doable too. Now, I think a lot of things do have to come together. My biggest question for Texas entering this year is the offensive line. I think the offense is only going to be as good as the offensive line is, and that's kind of scary. I think if you're a Texas fan, a little bit, if you look at just lack of experience. Probably going to be there. And even some of the experienced guys that are coming back, they're competing with true freshmen. While these true freshmen are very talented, I think you talk to any, offensive line coach in the country, they wouldn't ideally want to rely on true freshman offensive linemen if they could avoid it. So this is going to be, I think that's going to be something that, especially early on, is going to probably be a work in progress for Texas. But I think 8 wins is definitely doable. And I agree with you. I mean, I kind of been joking, like, if you only lose to Alabama by 2 touchdowns, take that as a win if you're Texas. What you don't want is for a performance, say, like how Texas played against Arkansas last year in Fayetteville. I mean, that was just we don't need to revisit that. I don't want to put
Yeah, it was a
Texas
3 and
fans
out
through
a
that.
thon is what it
Yeah,
was.
exactly. And so I think, be competitive, maybe just hold them to a 2 touchdown win, and then you take that as a win for Texas. And I know I'm like so not the type of like, participation trophies, like the uh moral victories or anything like that. But I think Texas still a ways away from competing with the Alabamas and the top teams in college football on a yearly basis. So I think that would be definitely crucial for Texas. That can help them build more momentum. But 8 wins, and I think you'd be excited if you're a Texas fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
All, all right, Chip. Well, I think that does it for us here. We appreciate all of the fans who tuned in to our live season preview for Texas football. Make sure you go over to Horns247. Keep it locked at Horns247 for all of the latest Texas scoop leading up to the season and in season. But for Chip Brown, I'm Taylor Estes. We'll see you over at Horns247.